Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be reviewing the Bath School Massacre that happened here in Michigan many decades ago. Let's get to it.
The aforementioned massacres are neither the first nor even the worst of their kind ever committed in North America. That dubious honour belongs to a largely forgotten 1927 massacre that resulted in the deaths of 45 people, including 38 schoolchildren. This is the tragic story of the Bath School disaster. Bath Township lies 16 kilometers northeast of the city of Lansing in Clinton County, Michigan. In 1927, the township was home to the small unincorporated community of Bath, with a population of around 300 people. As with many small rural communities, for much of Bath's history, its children's educational needs were served by a variety of local one-room schoolhouses. In 1922, however, residents voted to create the Bath Consolidated School District to serve the entire township. Consolidated schools, proponents argued, have many advantages over schoolhouses, particularly the dedicated school bus service. As Bath resident Montgomery J. Ellsworth wrote in 1927, "The children don't have to wade through the snow and mud. They are picked up at the door. A great many people appreciate not having their children playing along the road with rough children and standing a chance of being attacked by some lawless ruffian. The parents can feel that their children are safe from the time they leave the door to the time they are brought back, the bus drivers being selected from the most responsible men of the community who make application." Not everyone, however, was pleased with the decision. For in order to fund the construction, the township levied a school tax of $12.25 per $1,000 of property valuation. In 1923, the township acquired 5 acres of land to build an athletic field and built a dedicated electrical plant to power the school, further raising taxes to $19.80. Among the fiercest opponents of these increases was the villain of our story, 55-year-old farmer and electrician Andrew Kehoe. Born in 1872 in Tecumseh, Michigan, Kehoe's early life was marred by tragedy and hardship. After graduating from high school, Kehoe studied electrical engineering at Michigan State College in East Lansing and moved to St. Louis, Missouri to work as an electrician. Around 1910, Kehoe suffered a fall and sustained a severe head injury. According to his sister, J.R. Rose, Kehoe's recovery was long and difficult. Quote, "He was semi-conscious for nearly 2 months, and it seemed as if he never made a proper recovery. Added to that, about 3 or 4 years, he received a dangerous scalp wound while cutting down a tree on his farm." The first sign that the injury might have affected Kehoe's personality came in 1911, after his birth mother died and his father remarried to a much younger woman, Frances Wilder. On September the 17th, Wilder was attempting to light an oil-fueled stove when it suddenly exploded, engulfing her in flames. Kehoe watched his stepmother burn for several moments before dousing her with a bucket of water. However, as the fire was oil-based, this only helped the flames spread. Frances Wilder received third-degree burns over her entire body and died the next day. An investigation later revealed that the stove had been tampered with. Neighbours suspected Andrew Kehoe. The following year, Kehoe married Ellen Nellie Price and, in 1919, bought a 325-acre farm outside the town of Bath. He soon developed a reputation around town as an eccentric, mercurial figure. Though outwardly generous and dependable, often doing favours for his neighbours, Kehoe was also impatient, combative, and determined to get his way at any cost. For instance, Kehoe once shot a neighbour's dog that wandered onto his property and annoyed him with its barking, and beat one of his own horses to death because he felt it was being lazy. A frugal, almost miserly man, Kehoe went to extreme and often counterproductive lengths to save money and labour. Unlike his neighbours, Kehoe did little actual farming, instead spending endless hours tinkering with his tractor and other labour-saving machinery. He also used copious amounts of explosives to blow up stumps and rocks around his property, earning him the nickname the Dynamite Farmer. And when a new Catholic church was built in town, Andrew and Nellie became regular attendees until, of course, they were asked to pay their $400 contribution to the church's construction. According to Montgomery Ellsworth, after some time the priest went out to see why they didn't come to church or pay the assessment. Kehoe ordered him to the road and told him if he didn't get there, he would see that he got there. After that time, he never went to church, and the neighbours said that he had never allowed his wife to go. It should therefore come as no surprise that Kehoe was particularly upset by the Bath Consolidated School Board's decision to raise school taxes from $12.25 to $19.80. At the time, Kehoe's property was valued at $10,000, meaning that his yearly tax liability rose to nearly $200, no small sum in the 1920s.
This is what the future of writing looks like. Introducing Word Tune Spices, a new super tool that will help you.
In desperation, Kehoe ran for the local school board, being elected in 1924 as a trustee for 3 years and treasurer for 1 year. Kehoe clashed constantly with the other trustees,
How was he
protesting
elected?
that his taxes were too high, fighting any proposed increase in spending, and attempting to get the valuation of his property reduced. He was particularly belligerent towards the school superintendent, E.E. Hike, doing everything in his power to sideline or get rid of him. Whenever Kehoe didn't get his way, he would make a motion to adjourn the meeting, even going so far as to deny Superintendent Hike a single week of summer vacation. Hoping to get more power and influence, in April 1926, Kehoe ran for the position of school board clerk. By this time, however, his reputation had preceded him, and he was soundly defeated. And things only got worse from there. In June 1926, Kehoe learns that the holder of his mortgage, the widow of his uncle, had begun to foreclose on his property. Meanwhile, Kehoe's wife, Nellie, had recently contracted tuberculosis and was frequently in and out of hospital, further straining the family's finances. Humiliated by his electoral defeat and facing financial ruin and the loss of his home, Andrew Kehoe decided to take revenge on Bath and its 300 residents. The sheriff who served the foreclosure notice later recalled Kehoe muttering, "If it hadn't been for that $200 school tax, I might have paid off this mortgage. If I can't live in that house, no one else will." It's not known exactly when Kehoe started plotting his despicable act, but based on the timeline of events, preparations likely began in August of 1926. The school board had hired Kehoe to perform repairs on the school's lighting system, giving him free access to the building throughout the summer. Over the following months, Kehoe accumulated more than 1,300 kilograms of dynamite and pyretol, an incendiary explosive commonly used by farmers for clearing debris. He bought small amounts from differing stores to avoid raising suspicion. He stashed these explosives throughout the school's basement, wiring them to a homemade timer fashioned from an alarm clock. At the same time, Kehoe set about preparing the destruction of his property and everything on it. He cut all his wire fences, girdled his shade trees, and cut his grapevine plants, and then locked all of his equipment and draft animals in his tool shed and barn. A month before, Kehoe tried to give his best horse to his neighbour, McMullen, but McMullen, noticing that his neighbour hadn't worked on his farm for nearly a year, suspected Kehoe was planning to commit suicide and gave the horse back. So Kehoe decided to destroy the animals along with everything else, tying their legs together with wire to prevent them from escaping, and planting the property with pyretol and dynamite bombs. Completing his preparations, he bought a bolt-action Winchester rifle and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and packed up his pickup truck with explosives and steel shrapnel. All this activity went largely unnoticed until New Year's Eve 1926, when Kehoe set off a large explosive charge on his property. When questioned, Kehoe admitted that he was experimenting with homemade explosive timers. Another neighbour noticed Kehoe carrying a large amount of equipment into the school at night, while yet another spotted the rifle and boxes of explosives in Kehoe's truck. But whatever suspicions the residents of Bath might have had, none ever reported Kehoe to the authorities. On the evening of May the 16th, 1927, 2 days before his planned attack, Kehoe did something unusual, and in hindsight chilling. As Montgomery Ellsworth wrote, Mrs. Blanche Hart, 5th grade teacher, called Mr. Kehoe over the telephone and asked him if she could bring her class to his woods on Thursday for a picnic. He told her that would be all right, and hung up. A short time afterwards, Kehoe called her over the telephone and asked her if she couldn't just as well have her picnic on Tuesday, as it might rain on Thursday. I suppose he wanted the children to have a little fun before he killed them. That same day, Nellie was released from St. Lawrence Hospital in Lansing and returned home to the farm. Sometime between then and the bombing, Kehoe murdered her, bludgeoning her to death and stashing her body in the chicken coop to burn along with everything else. The stage was finally set for Andrew Kehoe's bloody revenge. On May the 18th, 1927, classes for Bath Consolidated Schools, 236 students, began at 8:30 a.m. At 8:45, the alarm clock timer ran down to 0 and set off the explosives hidden in the basement. A massive explosion ripped through the school, demolishing an entire wing of the building and instantly killing 36 students and 6 staff. First grade teacher Bernie Sterling later recalls a scene of utter chaos. The air seemed to be full of children and flying desks and books. Children were tossed high in the air. Some were catapulted out of the building. At that same moment, Andrew Kehoe detonated the explosives planted around his farm, instantly incinerating the property. Neighbours ran to the scene of the blaze and crawled through a broken farmhouse window to rescue anyone trapped inside. Finding no one, they salvaged whatever furniture they could before fire completely consumed the house. Then, as Montgomery Ellsworth recalls, Kehoe came out of the smoke with his machine, a Ford pickup, and drove up even with where they were. He had a funnel in the gas tank. He stopped and took it out, then looked in and picked up the cap and screwed it on. Kehoe walked over where the men were. They were about ready to walk in the back door when Kehoe said, "You are friends of mine. Don't go in there. Go down to the school." They turned and walked toward the road, and Kehoe leisurely walked to the machine and drove toward Bath. He grinned and waved his hands. When he grinned, I could see both rows of his teeth. Upon reaching the school, Keogh spotted Superintendent Hike and beckoned him over. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the two grappling over Keogh's rifle before Keogh set off the dynamite hidden in the truck, obliterating the vehicle and killing himself, Hike, and 3 bystanders: Nelson McFarren, a retired farmer, an 8-year-old student, Cleo Clayton, who had survived the initial blast at the school, and postmaster Gleno Smith, whose leg was sheared off by flying shrapnel. Meanwhile, residents from across Bath Township rushed to the scene of the school explosion to aid in the rescue effort. As eyewitness Robert Graves later recalled, mother after mother came running into the schoolyard and demanded information about her child, and on seeing the lifeless form lying on the lawn, sobbed and swooned. In no time, more than 100 men were at work tearing away the debris of the school, and nearly as many women were frantically poring over the timber and broken bricks for traces of their children. I saw more than one woman lift clusters of bricks held together by mortar, heavier than the average man could have handled with a crowbar. As news of the disaster spread, aid poured in from far and wide. Mr. and Mrs. Crumb, who ran the local drugstore, turned their store and house into a makeshift hospital until ambulances arrived to take the injured to Lansing. The Lawrence Baking Company sent a truck filled with pies and sandwiches to feed the rescuers, while Michigan Governor Fred Greene arrived to help with the relief effort, personally clearing bricks and other debris from the explosion site. Rescue efforts carried on through the night and the following day until the last body was found amid the rubble. In total, 44 people died that day, including 37 children aged 8 to 14. A 38th child, 10-year-old Beatrice Gibbs, died 3 months later of complications following surgery, bringing the final death toll to 45. A further 58 people sustained serious injuries. The Bath School bombing remains the worst school massacre in American history, but it could have been much, much worse. Firefighters and state troopers who entered the school after the explosion discovered 200 kilograms of undetonated explosives in the basement. It is believed that the shock of the first explosion caused a short in the detonator circuit, preventing the explosives from going off. If they had, it's likely the entire school would have been destroyed.
I never knew that part. So he planned on blowing up the entire school, not just half of it.
Killing everyone inside. On May the 23rd, a formal coroner's inquest was held, presided over by a Clinton County prosecutor. While there was no doubt that Keogh was responsible for the massacre, the inquest sought to determine whether he had been aided by any accomplices and whether the school board was guilty of criminal negligence for allowing the attack to take place. After hearing testimony from over 50 witnesses, the prosecutor concluded that Keogh had acted alone, and he had concealed his activities so well that the school board had no reasonable grounds to suspect his intentions. Like today's school shootings, Bath School disaster shocked the American people and inspired acts of sympathy across the country. As Montgomery Ellsworth recalled, quote, "I think we had the greatest demonstration of American sympathy ever awarded a grief-stricken community. Thousands and thousands of cars stayed in line for hours. I have a gas station 1/2 mile west of Bath on the main road to Lansing, where there was a double row of traffic all day. In the afternoon, it took about 4 hours to get 3 miles, but I don't remember hearing a single horn sounded. It was like a great funeral procession. Everyone's heart was filled with sympathy." But just like today, this media attention was short-lived. 2 days after the massacre, Charles Lindbergh became the first person to make a solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic. The Bath disaster was pushed from the headlines and was soon forgotten. Back in Bath, school resumed on September the 5th, classes being held in the community hall. Meanwhile, aided by a $75,000 donation from Michigan Senator James Couzens, the damaged section of the Bath Consolidated School was demolished and a new wing constructed in its place. The newly rebuilt Couzens Agricultural School was dedicated on August the 18th, 1928, and remained in use for nearly 50 years before being turned down in 1975. The site is now home to the James Couzens Memorial Park, dedicated to the memory of the Bath School Massacre. In the park stands the original cupola from the Bath School roof, a Michigan State historical marker commemorating the disaster, and a bronze plaque listing the names of the victims. Yet 95 years on, much remains unanswered about America's worst school massacre. What prompted Andrew Keogh to commit such a despicable act? Was he simply a psychopath, a disturbed man suffering from a severe brain injury, or simply a desperate man pushed beyond his limits by circumstance? We may never know for certain, but as a hand-painted sign found on Keogh's farm chillingly stated, criminals are not born, they're made.
He was just a narcissistic sociopath. He killed his stepmom who lit the stove. It turned out that someone had, wired it. He's the one that did it. He killed his stepmom. He's someone who, if he didn't get his own way before he did this, and no one talks about the Bath Massacre. No one ever talks about it. Anyways, peace everyone.